Suzuki or Honda, which fans should be smiling after this naked bike comparison test on the track? The answer's in this video. Folks, I don't know who among you is on Team Suzuki and who's on Team Honda, but here we've got two protagonists who will proudly wave their respective flags. Two motorbikes we more or less brought to the Pannonia Ring for a private outing. The Honda Hornet SP, the new one for 2025, and the Suzuki GSX-S 1000. And both featured in the 1000 PS naked bike comparison test. After they'd already been freshly shod with the Bridgestone S23 in the 1000 PS courtyard, we also took them along to our 1000 PS Bridgestone track days and really gave them a proper workout all day today. And now we're doing a comparison test for you. 3 people are on the grid. Who's ready here? Philipp's ready. He's desperate to get in front of the camera now. Philipp, come here. Tell me what's what. The man's on the starting blocks. He was properly ambitious out on track today. Properly ambitious. Philipp, what's up? Did these 1000-class naked bikes spur you on? Are you always this driven on a racetrack? But the main question, which bike made it easy for you to let that ambition off the leash?
I followed you, so you basically spurred me on. I wanted to ride in your slipstream and tried to stay there as long as possible. It was actually easier for me to go fast on the Honda. I had the impression you were on the Suzuki. I was on the Honda in the last session when I was following. It felt to me like the Suzuki digs a touch better out of the corners over the first few meters. Up top, I think the Honda is a shade stronger or claws some of that back. But I find that on paper you'd think the bikes are pretty similar, yet on track they do ride rather differently in my view. I'd call the Honda Hornet the slightly easier bike to ride, and I'd also say it gives you a bit more confidence. The Suzuki feels a little heavier, a bit more sluggish, not quite as lively as the Hornet, but across a whole stint that does add up. At first you think, yeah, they ride very similarly, but after say 20 minutes in the saddle, you do start to feel some differences.
Speaking of feeling differences, there are 2 areas here where the Honda, on paper, is clearly ahead. We've got the Porsche Brembo variant up front, and at the rear, actually an Öhlins TTX Supersport shock, whereas the Suzuki has good hardware fitted, but not with the same glossy look or big-name labels. Do you notice anything out there on track? We were on road tires, so we couldn't push right to the absolute limit. But can you feel a difference? What do you say?
For me, there wasn't a huge difference in suspension quality. I'd say the bit of extra precision on the Honda could be down to the suspension or just the whole chassis. Hard for me to pin that down exactly. Purely in terms of suspension performance, I didn't feel one was butter soft and the other rock hard or anything like that. I'd say they're on a similar level. With the brakes, I got on a little better with the Honda Hornet system. The feel and feedback were a touch more precise, a bit sportier for me, although the ABS on the Honda Hornet cuts in a little differently than on the Suzuki. I actually preferred how the Suzuki modulates when it intervenes.
We've no IMU in either bike here. Was that something you missed more on one than the other? Did it cross your mind at all? Or was it basically irrelevant out on track that the rider aids are a bit, let's say, old school?
I have to say I didn't feel a big difference there. What I always notice is how often the traction control light blinks, and you can feel it as well. I think you feel it a bit less when the Honda Hornet's traction control steps in. On the Suzuki, you sense it a bit more when it's regulating. What we should add is that we started out with too much tire pressure, then dropped the pressures after about 2 or 3 sessions. And that was really important. I felt both worked significantly better after that. The Bridgestone S23 then showed more of its potential, even for the racetrack.
I believe we dropped the tire pressure to 1.9 cold at the rear and 2.1 cold at the front. So shall we talk looks? I don't usually talk about styling because I've no clue, but you're the designer type, or at least that's the impression I get from your outfits at the office. What turns you on? What doesn't? How do these two look to you? I don't even know if our viewers want to hear our take on the styling, but go on, help yourself. You've got a feel for it.
I'll keep it short. The Suzuki looks a bit more Transformer-ish with that very angular design. Not exactly my favorite look. Because of that, it also comes across a bit bulky and rough-edged, I think. So the Honda Hornet appeals to me more, even if some people might rightly say the front looks very much like a Ducati Street Fighter 5.4, the face. But overall, the paintwork included, the Honda Hornet wins it for me on styling.
which clearly proves I'm the real design checker because I think the Suzuki is much prettier than the Honda. But that's okay. All good if I move on to Mex now? Sound all right? Or is there anything else you're desperate to tell your best mates out there about these two bikes that I forgot to ask?
No, both ride really well, but on the racetrack, the Honda Hornet was the slightly better one for me.
Mex, we need to be careful. We mustn't change anything here. Focus is locked. The white balance will ruin everything for us, and the wind is blasting the microphone. This feels like a proper 1000 PS Bridgestone track day. We had no rain. We had great weather. And Mex, what do you say when we're out there on this Bridgestone S23? To what percentage of your lean angle appetite do you go with a road tire like this in comparison? You also went out later on your private bike on slicks. How much can you squeeze out?
Honestly, I reckon the tire matches the bike's limits very well because both bikes don't have that much lean angle clearance. Very often the peg or that chicken nip under the peg is in contact with the tarmac. You keep hearing a scraping noise. And as soon as that point is reached, once the peg touches down, the tire's limit isn't far away either. Of course, with a lot of commitment on corner entry and a bit of experience on track, you can counter that, compensate for it, and still bang in very respectable lap times. But at the end of the day, we have to admit we also took the tire to its limit today. Not just me, also you and Philipp. Everyone said at some point, okay, that's the line. But I think that's exactly what sets the Bridgestone S23 apart. It's forgiving. Nothing lets go abruptly. If you've got a bit of feel for riding, you notice, okay, something's coming, the tire's talking to you, it's giving you good feedback. And yes, in that sense, I have to say it's fine. You can absolutely do track days on it and you can absolutely run genuinely brisk lap times. I'd say under 220 at the Pannonia Ring, nice and easy. Beyond that, it's of course a question of risk and experience, depending on what's to hand. But it's a really great tire and it was huge fun.
We actually did a 214.6 today, by the way, on the best lap. You were probably even quicker. Something else I want to pin down about seat heights. Because you're a quite tall guy, how was the freedom to move on both bikes? Where could you position yourself better here on track? Where could you be more active? And where did you feel more like you were on a living room sofa rather than a sporty tool on a racetrack?
The freedom to move was clearly better on the Suzuki, significantly better. Two reasons. On the seat you can slide further forwards and back than on the Honda. The Honda forces you much more into one seating position. And the Honda also has very pronounced plastic sections at the tail that get in the way when you're hanging off. I'm a tall bloke, I always have to slide quite far back to make room on the bike, and then I'm constantly making this rather unpleasant contact with the sharp-edged plastic at the rear. That really bothered me on the Honda. So the Suzuki is a clear winner for me. A second huge reason is my size 46 feet that I always had to stack somewhere. On the Honda, especially in right-handers, when you want to rotate your foot to hang off, the end can get in the way. Honestly, in right-handers, I never found a really comfortable position where I could say, hey, I feel good, I can ride my style. On the Suzuki, overall, you can make really good use of your body movement on the bike because its handling is more inert. You notice very clearly the Hornet is the more agilely engineered bike. And with the Suzuki, you actually need that hanging off, or you often have to initiate a bit more momentum with your body to move from one lean angle to the next relatively quickly. There are probably several reasons for that. For one, we've a 190 rear tire here, while the Hornet runs a 180 rear, but on the Suzuki we also have a 50 profile. So the tire's profile is relatively conservative, quite a flat crown, and that also means you don't get the same agility that the Hornet has baked in. Why wasn't I completely happy with the Suzuki anyway? I keep thinking the bike would benefit from a steering damper. On corner exit, the front goes light, it starts to shimmy. On corner entry, if you try to brake in hard, as far as the ABS allows, there are a few movements at the rear. So the sportier and faster the pace gets, the less comfortable it becomes on the Suzuki, really. Which makes me think, why? It's a pity. We've got superbike grade chassis, a cracking frame, a cracking swing arm. But I'm not exactly sure what it is. I spent some time on the suspension today as well. Ben from Martin Bauer's team is here too. He gave us a setup, significantly firmer, also on damping. That made it much better. We've got fully adjustable hardware fitted, also on the Suzuki. On the Honda, the Öhlins kit obviously shines, but you do have to spend time on it. I'd also like to say a word about the brakes. Both have fairly conservatively tuned ABS overall. In terms of outright braking performance, I'm better off on the Honda. It's also got the higher spec system, to be fair. That one has the posh Brembo Stilema, while the Suzuki runs Brembo M4. Even so, on the Suzuki it also regulates very early. I repeatedly had the issue that you need to feed in brake pressure incredibly progressively and also allow enough gap, enough time between rolling off the throttle and picking up the brake lever. If you make abrupt, snappy inputs the way you normally would on a sport bike, the system responds with very long and uncomfortable intervention cycles, which at higher speeds can at times even get a bit sketchy. But yes, that brings us to the core question. Do we want brilliant, affordable bikes, or would we rather have an IMU on board like others in this class? For example, KTM with the 990 Duke and so on. There I've got the option to have ABS only on the front wheel, no assistance at the rear. And you have to say, that works really flawlessly. For a hobby rider, that also makes for a brilliant experience. And here, unfortunately, you really have to say on both that once the pace climbs a bit, this ABS does rather spoil the party.
Okay, and just to nail down a personal favorite on the engine topic, who's got the cooler engine, Honda or Suzuki?
The Suzuki has the cooler engine for me. The overall package is better on the Honda though. Why is that? The Honda is geared significantly shorter. I can use the power here at the Pannonia Ring with all these tight corners much better, whereas on the Suzuki, even in second gear in the tighter bends, I often think I need to wait a bit on the throttle until I'm back in that window where the power delivery suits me again. So this short stacked gearbox is absolutely brilliant here at the Pannonia Ring. And the Honda's engine, well, it's got a bit more life in it, a bit more character, I don't know. On the Suzuki, I think, that engine is just so silky and smooth in its response. As long as you're not in the very sharp A mode, but in mode B or C it picks up beautifully, super easy to dose. So for me, subjectively, the Suzuki's power plant is the classier, more mature, cooler one. Yeah. And on the Honda, the overall package is simply easier to exploit here on track. Another great point on the Honda's engine topic, in the user modes I can configure the engine braking really well and across a very wide range. I did 3 sessions. In the first I rode a standard mode, and for the other 2 sessions I set up a user mode and cranked the engine braking way up. So lots of engine braking. And that makes it very easy on the Honda to hold a tight radius. In the coasting phase, the bike is really drawn in neatly by that engine braking, and that lets you pick your line easily and ride the sportier arc. On the Suzuki, as I said, firstly, it's that inertia where you always need a lot of effort to point the bike the right way. And secondly, the engine braking isn't configurable to the same extent. Those 2 things, in the end, made the Honda the faster bike for me.
Mex, thanks very much for your analysis. Folks, I hope you've already picked up some valuable info and that both the Suzuki fans and the Honda fans found a bit of balm for the soul. What definitely soothed our souls today was the fun of riding these naked bikes on a racetrack. And both of these bikes nail that. You hop on without tire warmers, wind it on, and have a brilliant time in the saddle. They sit in a power category where you're not constantly fearing for your life, yet you still get the right hit of adrenaline, and both do a great job of making you feel you're on a cool, big, powerful motorbike without constantly feeling like you're fighting the bike in a battle for survival. That's not the case with either of these two. That's more the case one class up, those Street Fighters, Super Dukes, and that category, bikes where you definitely feel more fear. These two don't radiate that fear. They're lovely, active, laid-back bikes to ride, but not widowmakers. One little point I don't think anyone's mentioned yet, the Honda surprisingly has a very firm seat that also passes on a lot of feedback, whereas the Suzuki fits a comfort oasis. And that also says something about the Honda this time. The Honda is noticeably wilder than earlier CBs or earlier Hornets. I think of all the Hornets Honda has brought out so far, this is the wildest and most unreasonable, properly gritty, raspy engine. And the masterstroke, as Mex already mentioned, is that they've managed, under Euro 5 Plus, to deliver this engine with gearing that puts it bang in a really great working rev range in real use. So it's wilder than you'd give it credit for. And the Suzuki, for me, was the cooler bike on the road, and it's also the cooler bike here on the racetrack. Overall, it feels more assured, more refined, more how I ride these days. A bike where I savor the ride in the saddle. And when I look at it, the aluminium frame and aluminium swing arm, those are things I know from the GSX-R parts bin, and those details please me more than on the Honda. So overall, I'm one of those who tend to be on the Suzuki track, but that might also be a matter of taste. So post your taste below. What do you prefer, the gold wheels or the blue ones? Which bike steals your heart more? Post it below. Your comments really enrich our videos. And for those who already own a new Hornet or are already out there on the GSX-S 1000, post your long-term experiences below as well. Thanks, cheers, and see you next time on 1000 PS TV.